well, for me, this is usually the last thing I consider when doing something, but the business model of how you would actually go about. If we were to build a relationship app, what kind of business model would we have? So one thing we realized in doing the previous episode was that the objective of the applications, or what they proclaim is their objective, is generally in conflict with the way that they actually work. So the objective is to connect people together, is to get them into these relationships. But in order for them to make money, they actually need to keep people apart so that they keep coming back to the service. So for us specifically, we want them to actually be aligned. And our objective will result in less users. So yeah, thoughts about that, thoughts about keeping our objective aligned with our business model.
Yeah, I think towards the end of the last episode, we sort of discussed an important point, I think, which was that I think that a relationship can be a relationship app can be a maintainable business model, but it can't be a perpetually growing business model. And so in the initial stages, there's obviously growth as you spread it out throughout the population. But then your app should almost stay in line with the size of the population. So if population was to go down, I would expect, if we're trying to achieve our goal, that you would see a less usage on the app. And if the population were to grow, then you'd see more usage. And if the population was to stay stable, then our app should stay stable after its initial period of that it gets to a particular size, which sort of meets the percentage of the population which we service. So I think the end objective for the business is to have a maintainable business model which grows in alignment with somewhat with the population.
I want to reiterate and rephrase what you said there and see if you agree with this, because I'm making some assumptions here. Okay, assume population remains the same. We would reduce the number of users over time because there's no new users can come in. Say, obviously to begin with, it'll get to a certain point. There's a certain number of single people. But if we were to say that, okay, the ones that we connect last in that relationship, over time, it will always diminish, right? But obviously the population doesn't stay static. It either increases or decreases. If it increases, the rate of increase of population of people who are viable for this service also, you think about population, not everyone is actually in the situation where they are looking for a relationship. So it will increase at a rate. We want to also be connecting people, be getting people into relationships at a faster, if we're doing our job well, we should be getting people into relationships at a faster rate than you would expect population to be growing. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I think it's an interesting point. I think to some extent, yes. I think there's always a period of time where, I guess I say that because if we're doing our job, we should be in harmony with the way in which it's growing. So you don't want to grow a relationship that fast that you're outstripping it, as in you're outstripping the population's need, because you might be taking shortcuts in order to do that. So it's to give it time to actually the relationship to grow correctly. So maybe there's a point at which if you were doing your job, you get to a point where it takes, I don't know, maybe 12 months to get that before someone gets into a relationship or something like that. And then you can't go shorter than that because it comes at a cost. So maybe there's a sweet spot.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm just that there might be a pace that is ideal. But in terms of, and I don't want to say population because that's actually wrong. I don't know what the marketing or the term they would use when normally doing this, but I'm going to say viable user base, let's say. So people who are whatever of a certain age who are are single, are looking for that long-term relationship, that will grow. We don't have control over the rate that grows at. I'm assuming here that rate would be less than than the rate we would have of people getting connected in a relationship. Or do you see it as actually it'll probably balance out?
Yeah, I have a feeling it might balance out. Yeah. I feel like it would sort of balance itself out naturally. And it would, if we were doing our job correctly, obviously there's a period of growth which you would have, But the ultimate goal is to have sustainability. It is that X amount of people are born and X amount of people pass away and X amount of people hit a point at which they want a long-term relationship. So if you get to the system that becomes a bit of a stable state, I know that's a bit difficult to consider, but let's say the population becomes at a stable rate, which the same amount of people coming in are the same amount of people that pass away. And then that's the first stable rate, is the population is stable. And then the second stable rate, I think, is the rate at which you can find someone a long-term relationship. Now, in an initial period, if you're doing your job correctly, you probably would be able to speed up that process somewhat. But there's going to be a point at which of diminishing returns where you become stable in that ideal sweet spot as well. So that's why I think it will all balance out in the long run, because those two factors come to a point where your business is stable and it just fluctuates based on the population growth or decline.
Yep. Now I'm with you. Now I'm in agreement with you that, yes, initially it might be faster because you're starting it up, but eventually you'll find that steady state where it's like, okay, incoming is equal to outgoing, to make it very dehuman and abstract. What I want to say with that is, one thing I'm guessing we can agree on is that it is limited. It's either stable or decreasing. It isn't actually increasing over time. Like, there isn't, the way we look at things currently in a lot of different aspects of life is that there is infinite ability for growth. Whereas we're saying actually there's not. There's a stable state, or that it's always decreasing.
Yes, unless obviously population is continually growing, then you could grow at the rate of the population that we would grow at. But yes, let's keep it as yes, we want it to at some point become stable, and at some point it might actually decline.
So we're assuming then that our user base is always at least stable or decreasing. We're not assuming that the user base will actually continually increase forever.
Correct. There is no finite growth, infinite growth. Yes.